Good morning, everybody. It's very good to be here today. I've had this date circled on my calendar for a couple of weeks now, several weeks now, and it's one I've been looking forward to. Nice to see everybody again and to hear your voices and to worship with you for certain. I wasn't sure what to preach on when I got here. That is the difficult thing about doing a one-off, just when you're going and visiting a congregation, just one sermon. You've got this whole book to pick from. What am I going to preach from? And difficult to narrow down to what it is you want to do. When I left, I was preaching through James, and I thought, well, that makes sense then. I'll narrow it down to James, and I'll just pick something from James. But what am I going to... I preached through most of the first two chapters. What am I going to preach on now? So I did the only reasonable thing. 2 weeks ago, I was teaching our children's class at church. So before the class began, I asked them to pick a number between 3 and 5. And somebody said 5, so I said, okay, it'll be something in James chapter 5. And I said, pick a verse for me, or pick a number for me between 1 and 20. And somebody said 9. So I thought, okay, James chapter 5, verse 9, it will be. And then I went on and taught their class. And then I went home and opened up my Bible, kind of anxiously, to find out what James chapter 5, verse 9 says. And it's this: don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. So there we go. Don't grumble against one another, my dear brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. It's a very good verse. It's a verse you'll all be excited to be berated for over the next half an hour or so. But I was wondering, what actually am I going to say about it? It's not a verse, I think, that gives you an obvious direction in terms of how you're going to expand on that, how you're going to work it into the lives of people. It just kind of says what it says. A lot of our wisdom literature is like that, of course. The books of the Bible, like Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, certainly James as well, that fit into that just sort of general instructions for life. Once you've heard it, you know everything that there is to know about it, and it's difficult to know what to say more about it as the preacher. So I use the preacher's trick of going back a couple of verses and going ahead a couple of verses and seeing if I can get a bit of additional information. And so we get this, starting in verse 7. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. More good verses, not a lot of connection to do not grumble against each other, so I'm thinking, okay, well maybe I'll read ahead a little bit and get some connection there. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. Okay, well, not a lot of connection there to grumbling against each other as well. I wanted something about how we treat each other as a family, how we relate to each other as brothers and sisters, how we're on a common faith journey together and need to be strong together, and we shouldn't be grumbling against one another or backbiting each other. But don't get any of that in the verses that follow, and so I thought, okay, I'm on my own here. James chapter 5, verse 9. But then I noticed something that is kind of odd. Neither one of those sections I just read seem to connect to James chapter 5, verse 9. But they do connect to each other through that theme of patience. Both of them mention being patient. Patient as you wait for the Lord's coming, and patient in the face of suffering. And I thought, well, if those two are both connected by patience, then maybe there's some connection to patience in chapter 5, verse 9 as well. So I started thinking about what it means to be patient and how these verses address it in different ways. The first section, in verses 7 and 8, is talking about patience as we wait for something good. He says, be patient as you wait for the Lord's coming. We're all looking forward to the redemption of the earth by God being completed in the return of Jesus Christ. And every time we look at the news, or every time we go to the doctor, or every time we pick up the phone call and somebody on the other end has some bad news for us, every time something is depressing or anxiety producing in life, we think, oh, I just can't wait for the Lord to return. I just can't wait for God's plan for humanity to finally be fully revealed and accomplished. I can't wait for the streets of gold, walking along in a city where no light is needed because God is our light. I just can't wait for no more crying, no more death, no more pain, no more misery. I'm looking forward to something good. I've definitely said here before, but you might not remember, the first year that we were married, Ashley and I lived in different countries. The plan was for her to move to Canada with me, but they, instead of giving her a 6-month visitor's visa where we could apply for permanent residency, they gave her a 6-week visa, which is nowhere near long enough. So for 6 weeks she lived with me in Canada, then she went back to Oklahoma, and we spent a year approximately apart. A couple of times was able to book a flight down to Oklahoma to see her. And then when it became clear that she was never going to move to Canada, that wasn't going to work out, we decided that I was going to move to Michigan and she was going to move to Michigan. And we were going to be reunited again. Those times when we were going to be reunited were just unbelievable joy. Going to see my wife again. What a great thing to happen. I've been married for, 5 months now. I've been married for a year now. It's going to be great to see my wife again. But boy, there's nothing that drags on in time like that 2 weeks before you're going to go see your wife again. You just can't believe that time is going as slowly as it actually is going. You'll wake up on a Thursday and think, wasn't it Saturday, yesterday? How is it we've gone back 2 days? I don't understand what's going on here. The verses after 9, 10, and 11 are talking about patience while we're enduring something painful. So there's the patience that has to happen while we're waiting for something good, and then there's the patience that has to happen while we're enduring something painful. He says, we think about the patience of the prophets in the face of suffering, as you are undergoing suffering. I don't know why, but whenever I read about suffering in the Bible, the first thing that comes to mind for me is toothache. There are definitely other ways to suffer than that, but that's always the first thing that comes to mind for me. And most of you in here will have had a toothache at some point that's very distracting. It doesn't really allow you to do much else in your life. That pain in your jaw, you can't focus on anything else. And many of you will have had the experience of having a toothache like that and calling the doctor and being told that 2 days out, 3 days out, 4 days out is the earliest you can get an appointment. And what are you going to do for that amount of time? Well, what you're mostly going to do is be crabby with all the people in your life because you're in quite a bit of pain and you can't do anything about it. James says, we need to be patient during suffering. Why don't you think of the prophets who were patient? Why don't you think of Job, who was patient? As I was thinking about what patience means then, and trying to rope verse 9 into it, I was thinking patience really is we're having an emotional reaction to something, and we need to restrain that emotional reaction with a little bit of perspective. We're having an emotional reaction that is leading us to behave a little bit out of sorts, a little bit out of character, a little bit differently than how we would want to behave, and we need to get some perspective to rein that emotion in. Whether it's we're just so overcome with emotion about something good that's happening and we just can't wait for it to get here and we're just all abuzz with excitement and we can't focus on the things that we're supposed to be doing and we're disappointing people because we're just looking ahead to next Friday when my flight goes to Oklahoma or whatever it is. Or we're suffering so much that we just are grumpy and crabby and angry and aggressive with people and the dentist can't get us in for 3 days and we're having an emotional reaction to what's going on in our body and we just need to restrain that a little bit. I think that's what patience is. If it really comes down to it, we're having an emotional reaction to something and the person asking us to be patient is saying, you need to just sort of temper that emotion, rein it in a little bit, keep a little bit of control over what's going on in your heart, over what's going on in your mind, in your gut, wherever you have your emotional reactions. Just temper that a little bit with some perspective. And so James, as he's writing about looking forward to the Lord's coming, says, think about the farmer who is waiting for the rains to come in the spring so that his crops will grow and he can harvest them and sell them and provide for his family. He doesn't worry about those rains coming. He knows that they will come. We've built up that racial knowledge over millennia of being farmers. Every year the rains come, and we don't need to worry about it. The spring happens every year. And in the same way, God has been faithful to us again and again and again over the millennia. And just like the farmer can look forward to the rainy season and know it comes, we can look forward to God's faithfulness being enacted. We can look forward to Him achieving what He has promised to achieve. And so we don't need to be anxious about the Lord's coming. We can look forward to it as a good thing, a purely good thing that is about to bless us. And so even though in the middle of it we have this reaction where sometimes we're a little disappointed, what if God is not going to be faithful this time? What if God can't achieve for me what I want Him to? What if my hope in Him is misplaced? No, James says. Have a little perspective to rein in that emotional reaction. And know that you are going to be okay, that God is faithful, that He does bless us, and that good thing that we've been looking forward to since we were little children in Sunday school being told about heaven, that good thing that we've been looking forward to is on its way. And if it seems like it's taking a long time, it's because God is waiting for the right, perfect time to bless the earth with His ultimate promise. So a little bit of perspective helps us to have a little bit of patience, helps us to rein in that emotional reaction. If it's suffering that we're undergoing, something bad that's happening to us, and we're just angry and aggressive and lashing out around us, James says, well, why don't you think about Job? Is what you're going through as bad as what Job was going through? Because Job was able to hold it together under what I think we would describe as extremely annoying circumstances, with all his wealth and children being destroyed in just a matter of days. Job was undergoing something that very few people have ever had to experience. And he faced it with equanimity, and he faced it with some serenity, and he faced it with patience. And even though he had every right to have an extreme emotional reaction to what was going on in his life, he looked at what was going on and said, I need a little bit of perspective. And my perspective is that sometimes good happens because God has blessed us, and sometimes trouble happens because that's the world we live in. Should we expect good from God and not from trouble? Job says to his wife. A little bit of perspective helps him to rein in that emotional reaction. And James says to us, take some perspective yourself and think about whether what you're suffering is as bad as what Job suffered. And think about whether you really need to snap at your partner of 30 years over what's going on right now. So with that in mind, thinking about patience, thinking about looking forward to something good and being patient about it coming, thinking about the sufferings that we're undergoing and being patient through them, and needing to rein in that emotional reaction to the circumstances of the moment. What do we think about grumbling against each other? Our church is a community, a family. And whenever we are in a tight community, whenever we're with people that we see a lot, whenever we're with people that we bump into a lot and sort of jostle for space with in life, there's going to be tension. I see this at work all the time, as I'm sure you do too, at Chick-fil-A. We have people working in the kitchen grumbling about the people who work up at the front, serving the guests, and people serving the front grumbling about people who work in the kitchen. People in the front will say, well, now I've got to go explain to the guests why we got their order wrong, because the kitchen couldn't do things right, and the kitchen are always doing things wrong. Or the people in the kitchen saying, the people in the front think they're so special, and they're the only one who need anything because they're the ones dealing with guests, but we have real problems back here as well. We have people who work the morning shifts grumbling about the people who work the evening shifts. They never clean things properly at the end of the day, and we're coming in and there are dirty dishes lying around and the counters haven't been wiped down. And we have people grumbling at the end of the night, saying the people in the morning didn't make enough salads when they came in, so now we're waiting 10 minutes on a salad for a guest. We have leaders grumbling about the people below them, saying, well, how am I supposed to properly manage the restaurant when these people don't care about anything and they're lazy and they don't follow through? And we have the people down below grumbling about the leaders, saying they're overly critical and they demand too much and they don't understand what it's like to actually do the job. We just have grumbling all the time. We're grumbling in our families. Our kids are always grumbling about each other. Somebody's in my space. Somebody took something I wanted. Somebody isn't letting me use whatever. If I'm honest, it's not just the kids who grumble. Sometimes the grown-ups grumble as well. We're grumbling all over the place in our communities where we spend a lot of time together, our work lives, our home lives. So it's not surprising that we would have grumbling in our church communities too. We talk about the church being a family as if that was a positive thing. But many of us come from very broken families where there is tension and there is hurt and there is anger and there is wickedness and selfishness of all kinds. It's good that we call ourselves as family, and it's good that we think of ourselves as brothers and sisters, but we shouldn't think that that just magically makes problems go away. People are still people. So we will grumble about each other. We grumble about the people who are late to church all the time. We grumble about the people who are sporadic in their attendance. We grumble about the people who wear the wrong clothes. And we grumble about the people who notice all those things. We grumble because people's prayers take too long, always. Every week they get up to pray and it takes too long. We grumble about the people who sing too loudly. We grumble about the people who chew gum. We grumble about all sorts of things in the church. And here's the thing, we're having an emotional reaction to a stimulus. Somebody singing is distracting me while I'm trying to worship. Somebody's lateness makes me think they don't care about worship starting at a particular time. They don't care about me trying to be in the right frame of mind for what's happening. We're having an emotional reaction to a stimulus. And that's okay. My dad always said that emotions are like the lights on your car dashboard. They're there to tell you something is wrong, right? When the check engine light comes on, or the air tire pressure comes on, or whatever it is, that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the light to be there, telling you that something is wrong. We don't blame the light. We just say, oh, I need to do something about this. And our emotions, my dad would say, are the same way. We don't need to fear them. We don't need to misunderstand them. We don't need to blame them. We don't need to wish we didn't have emotions. We just need to realize that if I'm angry or afraid or feeling any of these negative things, it's a sign that something is wrong, and I need to think about what that thing that's wrong is, and I need to do something about it. When we're grumbling, we're having an emotional reaction to a stimulus. Somebody is doing something at church that just provokes something in us. James says, maybe by the way he's grouped these verses together, James says, a little bit of patience is going to do well for us here. A little bit of perspective while we rein in that emotional response. James gives us an idea of what perspective might be. He says, don't grumble against each other, or you will be judged. for the judge is standing at the door. So his perspective to us is a little bit of fear. If we don't want to be judged and found guilty, if we don't want to be sentenced and punished, if we don't want to be told that we are wrong and are doing the wrong thing, then we need to be careful about how we respond to these emotional stimuli at church. When somebody is doing something that provokes us, we need to be careful how we respond, James says, because there is somebody watching you, there is somebody evaluating your behavior. Not our brothers and sisters here, but our Father above, who looks down and sees how we behave and sees the things that we say and sees what's in our hearts. Because a lot of our grumbling only takes place internally. The God who sees our hearts is willing to be judged in these circumstances, and is willing to pass sentence, and is willing to provide a punishment. And so we could be fearful, should be careful, should be cautious about the way we behave, the things that we say, and what we harbor in our hearts. Do not grumble against each other, but instead be patient. Have some perspective. Be aware that the judge is standing at the door. I was reading over that phrase last night, Thursday night, really doesn't matter. Some night this week. And something stuck out at me that I had not noticed before, which is that it reminds me very much of a much earlier story in the Bible. One of the very first stories, Cain and Abel. You remember the story of Cain and Abel before. It's easily summed up by one excellent joke. Of course, Cain wanted to be like his brother, but he just wasn't able. Perfect summation. Wonderful joke and a perfect summation of the story. Cain was having an emotional reaction. He didn't like what was going on with his brother offering the sacrifice that was accepted, and his sacrifice wasn't accepted. He did literally want to be more like his brother at this point. His brother had done the right thing and had his sacrifice accepted, and Cain said, "Why wasn't mine? What's going on? Why are we being treated differently? I want to be treated like Abel." And God sees that reaction. And God sees what's coming next. Not because God can look into the future necessarily, just because this is how things work. God sees what's coming with Cain because it's what always comes next. The emotional reaction, when it's not tempered, when it's not reined in, when it's not held control of, becomes an action that we will regret. And so God comes to Cain with a warning. Do you remember what he says? Sin is crouching at the door, and it desires to have you. And I thought about those two phrases being so alike. The judge is standing at the door, sin is crouching at the door. And I thought about how we should be fearful, cautious, wary, apprehensive about what happens if we're not reining ourselves in. God could see what was happening with Cain, and it wasn't because he has the power to see into the future. Any one of us could see what was happening with Cain. Any one of us has seen this a million times. A person who is caught up in an emotional reaction and refusing to temper it, refusing to hold it in, refusing to sort of gain some perspective on the situation and think through what's happening. We've seen it hundreds of times. The person who lets their emotional reaction become a behavior, an activity, an action in the world, and does something out of their emotions that when they cool down, they regret. We've seen relationships ended that way. We've seen property destroyed that way. We've seen jobs terminated that way. We've seen relationships come to an end because of a person who just wouldn't be patient. Am I saying that when we grumble against somebody in the church, we will inevitably end up killing them. I'm not saying that. If that were the case, our churches would be empty, every one of them. There would be nobody left out of the massacre. But God sees what's coming with Cain, and he gives him a warning, and it's a warning that's appropriate for all of us. Because what will be killed by the grumbling is the community that we have. Even if we don't end up killing the people in the church, we will kill the sense of community that we have together, that sense of family, that sense of being brothers and sisters. Because when we grumble, we're having an emotional reaction which is okay, but then we're not holding on to it. We're not reining that in. We're not gaining some perspective. We're not being patient, like James asks us to do here. And grumbling leads to other people grumbling. Grumbling leads to separation and division. Grumbling leads to people listening to things they shouldn't be listening to and forming ideas that they shouldn't form. And grumbling leads to counter-grumbling. Where we say, well, if they're going to say this about me, then I'll say this thing about them that I've noticed and haven't said anything about before now, but all of a sudden my tongue has been loose and I feel free to say the thing that I've noticed. And grumbling leads to the heart of the grumbler becoming hard. And grumbling leads to the ears of the grumbler being stopped up so they don't hear wisdom from those around them. And grumbling leads to leaders in weakness stepping away from situations where they are needed. Not always, of course. And grumbling leads to other members of the community stepping away from the church entirely because they don't see a community of Christ-centered people. Grumbling leads to outsiders who might one day step into this building, turning right back around again, because they say those people are no different than the people I work with. And what do they have to share with me that's so important? And grumbling may not kill people, but it certainly can kill churches. James says, be patient when you are faced with emotional reactions, experiencing emotional reactions. James says, hold that in. Rein that in. Be careful with your behavior, with your words, with your thoughts. James says, be patient. It's the only way to survive this. The perspective for the farmers is, we know the rains are coming because they always have. And the perspective for the sufferers is, if Job got through this okay, then you can get through this okay. And the perspective for the grumblers is, think about what you're doing. There's no innocent grumbling. There's no, well, this is just not that big a deal. It doesn't matter if I say these things. You're always opening the door. There may be a judge on the other side. There may be a crouching sin on the other side. But there's always the loss of something or someone. We need to be careful with our emotions. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just warnings that something bad is happening around us somewhere. There's nothing wrong with our emotions, but boy, can there be something wrong with how we react to them, how we handle them or don't handle them. James says, be patient. Hold back that emotional reaction. Hold back that temptation. Do something about it. To act out in anger or selfishness or greed or whatever it is you're experiencing. Hold that back. Because you're only opening yourself up to something much worse. There are a lot of things in putting this sermon together that I hadn't really thought about before. the connection between the judge is at the door and sin is crouching at the door. Sort of my understanding of what patience might be as a need to hold back an emotional reaction. Both of those things kind of came to me, and I was like, I think there's wisdom there, and I never really noticed it before. Next week, I need to go back to church and say thank you to my Sunday school class for leading me to James 5:9. If I were just reading through the rest of James, looking for something to pick on, I would have picked one of the fancy verses, like the thing about taming the tongue. It's a fantastic verse in James, or resisting the devil and he will flee from you. That's an excellent verse to preach on. James chapter 5, verse 9, I would have skipped right over. I would have said there's nothing really there. But those kids, those darn kids, they made me do it. I need to go back and thank them. I hope that you found some wisdom here today as well. It meant something to me to work on this sermon. I hope it meant something to you to work on it. I don't know how much of a grumbler you are. Maybe this sermon didn't really connect with you because you would never think to speak about somebody in the church like that or harbor ill thoughts about somebody. But I bet that there aren't a lot of people here like that. I know you're all fine people, but I bet we're noticing the people who are late, the people who are sporadic, the people who sing too loudly, the people who chew gum, the people who just do the things that we don't like. I bet that we're noticing, and I bet that we're thinking about it. Let's be patient with one another, because this community here is something special, something that God has given us to enjoy, not something for us to destroy. Let's not be grumblers. Let's be farmers. Let's be Job. Let's be patient. Let's be aware of the sin crouching at the door. Thank you.